It's so good to see you this morning. I am so glad that you're here. Can I ask you a question? Good. Why are you here? Well, some of you are like, well, we're not at the lake this weekend. Where else would we be this morning? Some of you are like, well, she makes me come on Sunday mornings. Some of you are like, I don't know. That's a good question. Why are we here this morning? Let me ask you another question. How did you get here? This thing called a car, and you get in it and you turn it on and it takes you wherever you want to go as long as you put gas in it. I always ask that question when we do our Connect group for people who are newer to Aldersgate. We have this time on Sunday evenings where we get together and it's just kind of an informal time to get to know one another. And I always ask the question, how'd you get here? And they look at me the same way, like we're normal people. We just drove here. And I'm like, no. How did you get to Aldersgate? Because what I'm always looking for is, how did you get to the church? How did you get to Aldersgate? Because most of the time, I would say 80% of the time, what I hear is someone invited me. Someone asked me to come. Our neighbors, someone I work with, a friend that we have invited us to come. Every once in a while, we'll get, well, we were new to town. We were looking for a church. We saw your website. Or we just drove by, saw the sign, so we decided to stop in. But 80% of the time, someone invited me. I'm saying that you are here this morning because at some point in your life, someone invited you into a relationship with Jesus. You are here this morning because someone shared Jesus with you, shared their relationship with God with you. At some point now, your story may be, no, that's not how it happened. I was in a room all by myself. It was dark. I just had this God moment. And that may be true, but you know what I know about that? Someone somewhere was praying for you. You are here because someone invested in you, shared with you, invited you. The real question this morning is, who are you inviting? Who are you sharing with? Who are you investing in? And I don't mean just the church. Who are you inviting into a relationship with Jesus? Who are you inviting into that place? And I know some of you are here this morning and you're not there yet. You're seeking, and that's why we do what we do. And we are so glad that you're here this morning. We're launching this series called We Believe. And basically what it is talking about our core values here at Aldersgate. Our mission at Aldersgate is to reach the unchurched and help them take their next steps in connecting with God, loving people, and impacting the world. And in that, we have 4 core values. Found people, find people. Saved people, serve people. Growing people, grow together. And grateful people, give generously. And we're going to take 5 weeks. We've got Vacation Bible School coming up, so that week's going to be a little bit different. But we're going to take these weeks to talk about these beliefs, because what we believe shapes who we are. And if this is what we believe, then it should shape how we behave. So this morning, we're going to tackle this belief: found people, find people. To do that, I would invite you to grab a Bible. Now, I know not all of you bring a Bible to church, and that's okay. If you don't have one with you, you can reach down there in the seats in front of you and grab one. Or you can take out your phone. I know a lot of you have a Bible app on your phone, or you can just Google it and go to John chapter 4. And this morning, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. This is a long story. I'm not going to read the entire story to you. We're going to look at different parts of the story. I'm not going to put those parts of the story up on the screen. So I would encourage you to get a Bible or a phone in your lap and keep it there so you can follow along with me this morning. Some of you may be familiar with this story. It's the story of Jesus meeting the woman at the well. Now, let me give you a little backdrop to what's happening here. Jesus has been ministering and really started his ministry in an area called Judea. And Judea was in the southern half of the territory. And he's now making plans with his disciples, the 12 he chose, to go to the northern half of the territory, or Galilee. So here's a little quiz for you. Sitting in here this morning, which way is north? I always love to do this. We're going to look this way to the north, okay? And so Jesus is in Judea, and he wants to get to Galilee, okay? Now, let me give you a little geography here. Judea and Galilee were probably some 100 to 120 miles apart. It depends on where you're at in Judea and where you want to go in Galilee. So it's basically like traveling from Lubbock to Amarillo. And so in this first century culture, walking, it would take Jesus and his disciples about 5 or 6 days to walk the 100 to 120 miles from Lubbock to Amarillo. And I'm sure they sang Amarillo by morning the whole time they were going. But they're going to walk that distance from the south to the north. Now, there's an interesting part in this story. If you're in John, you've got your Bible open on your phone. In John chapter 4, it says, and he had to pass through Samaria. And he had to pass through Samaria. Now, you're reading that this morning. You may not know what that means. You may have no clue. If you know the story, you're probably going, well, yeah, of course he had to pass through Samaria because that's how the whole story took place. But if you were a first century Jewish person reading this statement, it would take you completely off guard. Because even though the fastest way to get from Lubbock to Amarillo is straight up I-27, it's a straight shot. No first century Jew would have done that in their right mind. They would have gone to Crosbyton and Floydada and Matador and gone all the way around because there's this little place between Lubbock and Amarillo called Plainview, and it's a weird place. In the Bible, it's called Samaria. And it says in John 4:4 that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Shocker. The Jews would have been going, no, he does not have to go through Samaria. Nobody goes through Samaria. They literally would have taken 3 extra days to get from Judea to Galilee because they would have gone all the way around. They would have crossed the Jordan River, gone through the desert just to avoid going through Samaria because the Samaritans were people that they despised. Church history here, or Bible history here, is that when God's people were in the Old Testament, they were all together and then they divided themselves because they couldn't get along, and a nation divided will never survive, right? And so the northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians. The Assyrians move in and they take some of God's people, the Jewish people, and they take them and they exile them in Assyria. But some of them stay there, and the Assyrians and some other people move in. And so these people that stayed there, they began to intermarry with the Assyrians and these other cultures, and they began to be a mixed race. And in Jewish culture, that was not acceptable because they loved being a pure race. And so they despised these Samaritans. Worse than that, the Samaritans had these really messed up religious beliefs. Because when the kingdom came back together and God kind of restored everything, the Samaritans then said, look, we'll rebuild the temple. Their offer was rejected because they were despised. And so because of that, the Samaritans started worshiping on this mountain and not in Jerusalem where a real Jewish person would worship. Y'all following all of this? All of that to say there's no way that the disciples thought it was a good idea to take point A to point B and go through Samaria. But Jesus said he had to pass through Samaria. Just hang on to that for a second, okay? He had to pass through Samaria. Verse 5. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. What that means is it was lunchtime. Jesus got to the well. He sent his disciples into the village to get some food. He stayed there because he was tired from walking. Not only that, he knew what was about to happen. Can anything noteworthy happen at an old historical well where a weary traveler takes a break? Can anything noteworthy happen at the store where you shop, the gym you frequent, the school you attend, the workplace you go to every day, the soccer field your kids play on? because that's your Samaria. The Samaria is the place you have to go through, that you have to go through. Your Samaria is that place you visit frequently, that you spend time at, that you do things in, that you surround yourself with. That's your Samaria. You have to go there. You have to go to your workplace. You have to go to the store. You have to go where your kids' activities are. Those places are your Samaria. And if God can make something noteworthy happen at an old historical well, he can make something noteworthy happen at any of your Samarias. That's exactly what happened here. It is the noon hour. No one comes to get water at the noon hour. They come early in the morning or later in the evening. But not this woman who came to the well, because she had a history and she didn't want to be there early in the morning or late in the evening. She wanted to come at a time that was hidden. And it was at that time that Jesus decided to do something incredibly special. Where is your Samaria? Think of the places you see as normal, everyday, routine, that God may want to do something really special. See, oftentimes when we think of, finding people, we got to go find, that's our call, that's our mission, is to go find people. We're going to send people to Spain. We're going to do that here at the end of the service. We're going to pray over the Markhams. They've been called to be long-term missionaries in Spain. We're going to send them forth this morning. Here in a couple of weeks, we're going to share with you the announcement about our team that's going to Southeast Asia. We've got one of our college kids who's headed back from a trip to India. We've got 2 college students in Thailand. We've got 18 of our high school students in Washington, D.C. Is there any greater Samaria than Washington, D.C., right? And we often get in our mind, those are the places I've got to go find people. I've got to be sent to that place. I've got to go to, it's got to be far away. It's got to cost a lot of money. Your Samaria is the place you go every day. The place you shop, the place you work, the place you study, the place you waste time, the place you get into arguments with other parents. That's your Samaria. And God wants you to find people in your Samaria. They have this amazing exchange, Jesus and this woman at the well do. But I want you to notice something in verse 7. You still got John chapter 4 open. It says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Now again, you may read that and think, okay. But I want you to think about how non-special that was. How non-extraordinary that was. I mean, what else would you ask someone who comes to a water well? Give me a drink. It's just water cooler talk, right? Sometimes I think we get into our heads this idea that if we're called to be found people who are finding people, that we have to have this incredible wealth of Bible knowledge. And that we have to have the answer to every question that may be thrown our way. That we have to be able to say Jesus in at least 4 syllables. And as a Texan, that's really hard, isn't it? Right? It's like the story of the pastor who called in little Johnny and his buddy. And little Johnny and his buddy come to the pastor's office. He wants to see them one at a time. And so he asks little Johnny to come into his office, and his buddy sits out in the secretary's area. Little Johnny gets in the office and sits across the desk from the pastor, and the pastor says to little Johnny, Johnny, do you know where Jesus is? Little Johnny has to interpret that first. He has no idea what that means. He's looking at the pastor. He doesn't say anything. And so the pastor asks him again, Johnny, do you know where Jesus is? Johnny's eyes are so big, he has no idea how to respond to this. One more time, the pastor asks him, Johnny, do you know where Jesus is? He gets up, he bolts out of the pastor's office, he gets his buddy sitting outside and he says, come on, we gotta go. Somebody stole Jesus and they think we did it. But oftentimes we think about having to share Jesus in those terms, don't we? Like we gotta say it that we gotta know all the answers, we gotta have everything down. Jesus simply asked the woman, got any water? It's that simple. A simple question with the right heart can lead to a very extraordinary moment. And that's exactly what happened here. That leads to another question, which leads to another question, which leads to another question, which leads lots of answers. And at the end of the exchange, the woman believes Jesus is who he says he is. Scripture, verse 28, you still got John open. So the woman left her water jar, went away into the town, and said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? I want you to notice really quickly how the woman did it. This was her story, and it was so simple. She said, come and see. It was that brief. It was that short. Come and see. This guy, this Messiah, could this be? Come and see. You see, when we begin to share Jesus with other people, it's that simple. It's just to come and see. Come and see what God's doing in my life. Come and see what God has done in my life. It's really simple. We don't have to have the Bible to lay it out for us. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to have the right language. We just have to simply say, come and see. We try to make that so simple here at Aldersgate. You know, the best way to tell people to come and see, the best way to begin a conversation with Jesus or about Jesus with people is to invite them to church. And we try to make that so simple for you. We do things like these little cards. So Vacation Bible School is coming up Monday after next. And we give these little cards, they're scattered all throughout the room this morning. And it's real simple. You just take this card and you go home and you walk across the street to the neighbor who has kids and you say, hey man, did you know that our church is having this incredible Vacation Bible School? It starts a week from Monday. We would love to have your kids there. Let me just tell you what that did. Give me a drink. It's just normal conversation. Come and see. You take it to work and you share it with people who you work with, who you know that have kids. It's real simple to just say, come and see. And then that begins to open up a conversation, just like Jesus saying, give me a drink, opened up a conversation with the woman at the well. And here's what she says. Come and see a man who told me all that I ever did. Her story was real short. Her story was vulnerable. You got to meet this guy. He knew everything about me. Our story's that simple. It's just being willing to avail ourselves to what God has done in our life and what God is doing in our life. It's being willing to say, look, here's who I was before I met Jesus. Here's who I am now. Yes, still a screw up, but God's not done. He's still working on me. It's just opening our lives up in relationship to other people and sharing how God has played a big part in that. Just come and see. Here's what God's done. Her story was short. It was vulnerable. And skip down to verse 39. Many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of her testimony. Because of her short, vulnerable story, many people were found. It's that simple. What's your story? What's your story? How would you share that with someone else? Everybody has a story. And you know what's great about stories? Your story, it can't be wrong because it's your story. People can argue the Bible with you. They can argue theology with you. They can argue politics with you. Can't argue your story with you. It's your story. It's your vulnerability. Where's your Samaria? What's your story? And then I want us to notice one more thing from verse 28. Before we get to the woman's story, look what happened, verse 28. So the woman left her water jar. That's the whole reason she came to the well. She left the whole reason she came to the well behind. She completely dropped it and went a totally different direction. One of the things I love about being a pastor is getting to sit on the front row and watch people who are new coming to Christ, who are coming to Christ as new Christians, who are getting that experience, who are being found people for the very first time in their lives, whether they're a kid or a student or a college-age kid or an adult. Getting to watch that happen is just an incredible privilege, because you know what happens? They drop everything to go and tell everyone they know their come and see story, their vulnerability story. I mean, they will change 180 degrees to go and tell their family, to go and tell their friend. I mean, they will do everything they can to share Jesus with other people. Now, the other side of that is sitting on the front row. I often get to observe, including myself, what happens the farther removed we are away from that encounter with Jesus. The farther away we move from that encounter at the well with Jesus, our personal encounter, the farther away we get from that encounter, our story changes from come and see to been there, done that. Our story changes from, man, you got to come and see this. You got to come and see what God's doing. You got to be a part of this. You got to know this. Come on. You got to yeah, we're all Christians. We don't have to do that anymore. Because the longer we remove ourselves, or the farther we remove ourselves from that encounter we had with Jesus, the more and more we hang out with people who are like us, who know Jesus. The farther removed we are from that encounter, the more people that we have in our life that are Christians, and the fewer people that we have in our life that are non-Christians. Two things. Number one, we either need to find or reroute our Samaria, or number two, we need to open our eyes to the people in our Samaria. Let me give you an example. So I have two sons. One of them's out of high school now, but they both play sports. Our younger son's still playing sports. Do you know what a wealthy Samaria kids' sports is? Do me a favor, if you don't have kids that play sports, just go to a kids' sporting event. Open your eyes to the Samaria. Look, and if you see me there yelling, don't mistake me for one of those, all right? Because I'm just telling you, it's there. You got to open your eyes to it. But the farther removed we are from our encounter with Jesus, it becomes less of come and see and more of just been there, done that. The farther removed we are from our encounter with Jesus, it moves from a place of being vulnerable to a place of being prideful. The farther removed we are from that initial encounter, we're no longer, man, you got to see what God's doing. Yeah, man, you see what God can do. And you're, oh man, this is amazing too. You're not doing that right. Oh, you're not dressed right. Oh, you really shouldn't put that on your body. Oh, you really shouldn't act that way. The farther removed we are from our initial encounter with Jesus, we become less vulnerable and more prideful. Sitting on that front row, watching those people who come to Jesus for the very first time, you know what they tell us? They tell us, man, we really love Jesus, but his followers are nothing like him. We really love Jesus, but it's the church we struggle with. Because we've moved from a place of vulnerability to a place of pride. The longer we are removed from that initial encounter with Jesus, the farther we get from being effective to being ineffective. At the end of the encounter with the woman, Jesus' disciples come back with food. He's not hungry. They're confused as to why he's not hungry. And he starts telling them all this gibberish about, I have food. Nothing, you don't know anything about the food I have. And they have no idea what he's talking about. They're surprised that he was talking with this woman. They're surprised that he was talking to a Samaritan woman at that. And he begins to tell them that the harvest is plentiful. Samaria is all over the place. And then here's what he tells them. But I need workers who will go and share their story and will leave their watering pot behind to do that. Where is your Samaria? What is your story? And what do you need to leave behind to share Jesus with someone else? You're here today because someone else did that for you. You're a Christ follower today because someone else invited you. You're searching today because someone else has been vulnerable with you. Who will you do that with? In your seats, you have these cards. I'd like for you to find one. If it's not in your seat, look around. Find it in somebody else's seat or an empty seat. Grab this and put it in your lap with your Bible or your phone. These are cards we want you to take from here today. It just simply says, pray for one. There's, 220-ish people in this room this morning. What would happen if each one of us just prayed for one? Just found one, just shared our story with one, just went to one. On the bottom of this card, there's a place where you can actually fill in a name, and you might want to do that this morning. Grab a pen there in the seat in front of you, and you might want to put a name. You might know of someone already in your Samaria that you might want to put their name, and you may want to just begin to pray that God would open a door for you to share with them, to invite them, to visit with them, to be vulnerable with them. Perhaps you don't know that name right now, and you just want to leave it blank, but you're going to commit to praying for that one. You're going to open your eyes to your Samaria for that one, and you're going to be committed to being a found person who finds people. We want you to take this with you and put it on your refrigerator or on your desk or in your car, or wherever you need to put it, to constantly remind yourself that we are found people, called to find people. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 28, go find people in Judea and Samaria, Galilee, and to the end of the earth. Where's your Samaria? What's your story? And what are you willing to drop to be a found person who finds people? This is what we believe.